Now, following the same discussion about dimensions in the last video, something interesting happens with the whole nature of perspective, because we can talk about the cone entering the two-dimensional plane, and we get the feeling that this two-dimensional perspective is limited because it can't see the real cone. It's almost like it's seeing a shadow of the cone, right? In a sort of Plato's cave kind of sense. And that yet we can perceive the whole cone. But this idea falls apart when you start introducing different dimensions, when you start introducing the idea of higher and higher mathematical dimensions. Because suddenly, if the cone at a two-dimensional perspective is a slice of the high-dimensional cone, then the three-dimensional cone is a slice of the higher-dimensional cone. So this, what we see, is the same as the circled area here. It's just that this is a three-dimensional circled area. It's a three-dimensional slice of the whole object of which it is a part. However, what happens if there are infinite dimensions? If there are infinite dimensions, then there is no real cone that is less of a shadow than this one. In that situation, this little two-dimensional circular slice can be said to be the real cone. You can highlight it and say this is the cone, or the event of the circle getting smaller and smaller. This two-dimensional event is the real cone. It is no less, it is not a distorted view of the cone. It's not a limited, filtered, it's not filtered in any way. It is 100% cone. In the same way that we perceive this one to be. In fact, a more like down-to-earth example may work. A tree, you know, the classic Platonic example, I guess. If you've got a tree, and if the tree were to, you know, cross a two-dimensional plane, well, again, you would have this sort of little circle, or here you would have a bigger circle entering the plane. But we get the impression that we are seeing, well, I mean, that there are two sort of schools of thought generally. One would be that we are seeing the real tree, and that these lower dimensional versions are shadows. And the other view is to say that what we're seeing is, you know, our eyes are interpreting the signals of the tree, and we are sort of receiving a filtered version, a version that's filtered through our senses, but that is not actually the objective tree. However, if you start including an infinity of dimensions, then this tree is one of the keyframes, in the same way that you had keyframes of slices in two dimensions. The higher dimensional tree could be perceived as being an event in time, of which this is one of the keyframes. It's like a whole animation, but happening not in three dimensions. So all sort of impossible to imagine for us. So that then this, we see the tree as being a complete object, but it could be a shadow, a slice. However, what's counterintuitive is that in an infinite amount of dimensions, it's a shadow of something that isn't any less. It's a shadow of a shadow, basically. That there isn't a core tree, which is like the shining, resplendent truth of the real tree. The high-dimensional tree would maybe just be much more complicated, and this three-dimensional slice that we see is like one of its perspectives. But the high-dimensional slice is also a slice of an even higher dimensional tree. So the whole idea of how our eyes or our perception distorts the world, or it filters it through. What is it filtering? Is it filtering a reality that is more true than what we're seeing? For that to work, you would have to posit a limited amount of dimensions, because then you could say that there is some sort of a top dimension which is the real one, and then slowly as things descend they become more and more distorted. But as I've tried to argue in other videos, I don't think that is logically possible. So in the situation of an infinite amount of dimensions, this sort of feeling that humans have of being disconnected from the real world because they're only seeing a filtered version through the senses, kind of it could be questioned, basically, I guess, is what I would like to say.